Before we move on to we'll start to talk about Rutgers, but obviously the defense I do think was a highlight of this game. They bailed. I would argue they bailed JJ out. They played really, really well, and who is continuing to impress me is Keon Sen. 3 tackles adds to his stats from the last 2 games. He's supposed to be a backup, but he's playing like a starter, and it's going to be interesting how they use with Rod Moore when he comes back, how they rotate these players in and out. That'll be, I guess, Jesse Minner. Will need to figure out the best configuration, but Keon Sabb is looking pretty good against. Admittedly, not the greatest competition, but Nelson, what was your kind of take on the defense and Keon and just in general?
Yeah, I mean, so let's stick with Minner and Sabb in the secondary for a second. So Minner said this week, it was probably yesterday, but he talked about how they're almost at 100% in the secondary. He's like tentatively saying it, but hey, like I feel like we almost have everybody back, which means Moore is going to be back, Page is going to be back. That means Will Johnson's going to be back, and then you have Sabb with Sanders still and Wallace, right? So those are your guys. Sabb's that third safety. Who you can bring in if you want to go 3 high or bring someone down into the box, like Page and put Sabb out, or whoever you're more comfortable in coverage with. So they have some versatility now. Seeing Sabb get this playing time will be huge against some of these more pass-heavy teams, especially in the playoff if you potentially get there, And let's say you face a Washington and Washington comes to the Pac-12 or USC, you're going to need to have a third safety. So that's important development early in the season. The rest of the defense looked really good. Stopped the run really well. The guy that I want to talk about a little bit is Jalen Harrell. He got another sack, and he continues to look good, very good. I think he's at 2.5 in the season now in 3 games, which is fine, decent. But seeing him play well, it's interesting to me because I did not expect him to come out as the better pass rusher thus far. Among the group, I thought that would be Moore and McGregor and Stewart, and I thought Harrell would be actually the sort of the odd man out in that group when it comes to third down situations. But he's been great, so I'd like to see some of those other guys get to the quarterback a little bit more. But when you're playing a team like Bowling Green, they're going to be as conservative as they can. They're going to keep their tight end maybe to chip and a running back to help pick up the blitzer. So we'll probably see bigger numbers from them the more you get into Big Ten play and the more teams are really forced into situations where they're actually going to throw. Because Bowling Green was committed to losing that game, in the second half. Once they went down, a couple scores, they knew they weren't getting back out of that hole, and they didn't really throw it around. And that's part of salvaging your some respect or maybe the egos of your players and not letting them get too beat down. But yeah.
Yeah, I thought the defense played well. I don't know the exact yardage on these 2 plays, but it felt like a lot of their passing yard and just total offense came from the first play of the game where, I don't know, they overturned it, but the ball came out at the end, and they called it incomplete on the field and then reversed it up in the booth. And then the other one, Mikey had played it really well, swatted it away, and then it just ends up in the receiver's hands as he's on his back. So, I think there were a couple things that were concerning from Braden McGregor for me, which is unfortunate because I really like his potential. If he eever puts it together, man, all the tools are there physically, all the traits.
Right.
But there was a couple times where he kind of got sucked in and he left just a huge gap. That allowed Bowling Green to pick up a couple decent-sized chunks. So other than that, though, another great game from the defensive tackles. Keon Sabb is certainly flashing. I think I saw Jalen Harrell has like a 25% pass rush win rate, which is just absurd. Is just an absurd number. The defense held their own. Chris Jenkins had a pick. Quentin Johnson had a really nice pick on the sideline. And then Harrell had the strip sack. So, really solid performance from them. And I know we'll talk about it here upcoming, but you think about this defense going up against Rutgers. Rutgers has a solid defense, but that offense is not very good. And I think Michigan's going to be able to get after it on Saturday with kind of a below average passer, but they do have a pretty good run game. So I'm excited to see them against a somewhat competent run game and see these defensive tackles at work. So, But yeah, I was overall pretty pleased. Nothing concerned me at all about that game on Saturday from a defensive perspective.
I agree. And if you want to look at the running game for Rutgers, I mean, they're Kyle Monangai, I believe I said that right. Kyle Monangai is their running back, and he leads the conference in rushing yards. He also leads it in carries by like 2, but he's second in touchdowns behind yours truly, Blake Corum. So he's got 5, and he's played much in that first game, or they didn't need him much against Northwestern. But I think that's going to be an interesting first step of a test defensively, like you're sort of talking about there, Tanner, before you go up and play some of these guys like, at Penn State or Ohio State who have backfields. Just whoever they want to throw at you is going to be really good, especially with Travion Henderson or Mayan Williams and Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, among other teams. I like Noah Carter at Michigan State. So it'll be a good test for Michigan to get Monangai on Saturday against Rutgers.
Yep. So just to wrap here, and then we'll go into our sponsors and all that good stuff. But I'll ask you guys, who was the impact player? And now we'll have one that isn't JJ because of what happened. So I don't have to put except for JJ on this one. But who do you think was the impact player of the game for you, Nelson?
It feels easy, but it's got to be Blake Corum. I mean, it feels too easy, but I just think he played well. He looked great. It was his first 100-yard game, and he was efficient. And so, yeah, I think it's Blake. Defensively, too many guys played well that there's no one that to me stood out big time. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'll go Chris Jenkins. Had the pick, set up a short field. I was very annoyed in the stands at that point, like knowing Michigan was not going to lose the game, but just like, ugh. And then he makes a great play. Great read, soft hands, almost for the big fella, a touchdown. Almost carries the guy in the end zone, but felt like he was pretty disruptive all day.
All right, yeah, and I'm gonna agree with Blake Corum. We can have the same one. It's okay.
I didn't want to,
but that's fair. But I'm going Blake Corum because of exactly what you said. Obviously, 100-yard game, multiple touchdowns. We want him. He chose to come back. He could have gone to the NFL, and I like when he does well. I mean, I think he's one of the leaders of the team in so many different ways, and so just to see him doing well is great to watch. So when you look at their defense, and this is definitely something that gives me a slight bit more pause that Rutgers has been. I mean, it's Shiano. We know he's a defensive coach, but 19th ranked in the country. They're looking pretty solid on defense. I do think that Michigan's going to by far be the toughest test because Michigan can test any defense because JJ can throw, he can run. Obviously, you've got 2 extremely good running backs. You've got wide receivers, and especially Roman Wilson, I think, is really taking that next step. So it's going to be tough for any defense to face that, but especially, obviously Rutgers may have to be on the field on defense quite a bit. So that may impact them as well. So what, from a defensive perspective, Tanner, what are you seeing from Rutgers?
Yeah, I think they've got some guys, like I mentioned earlier. Like, I really like Aaron Lewis. I think he's a ball player. He's a defensive end who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, committed to Michigan, signed with Michigan, and then during COVID ended up transferring back to his home in New Jersey to play for Rutgers. I think he's a ball player. But I don't know. I just don't see a world where Michigan comes out, sloppy and not energized and just kind of lethargic. Like I feel like they're really just going to come out hot, and I just don't. I just think Michigan's going to be able to just overmatch them athletically, and I just don't see a way that Rutgers is able to stay in this game unless there are a ton of turnovers. Like that's the only issue. That's the only thing I can, conceivably see Michigan being in a close game. I just think that they're going to win this game by a few touchdowns. Like I think it's a perfect storm, unfortunately for Rutgers. Like rough game last week offensively for JJ, and some, just Harbaugh coming back, and it's Big Ten play. Like it just feels like the real season is starting on Saturday. I just feel like this is a team that's so mature and they're an older team. Like I have a feeling they're come out ready to go and have some fun, and I think they're gonna beat Rutgers pretty handily. So